Welcome to our celebration of the 8th anniversary of the South Seattle Emerald. My name is Marcus Harrison Green, and I am the founder and publisher of the Emerald. I've heard it said that a community is a people and not a place, but that is only partially true. Because you see, a community is a story of a people. It's tales of their overcoming, triumphs, and aspirations that bring a community fully into being. It is only through story that a community can be given the texture of complexity, the hue of humanity, and the frame of multidimensionality. It is in community where we learn how to be loved and return that love in kind. It is in community where our highest and most authentic selves can be seen. It is in community where we can be made whole again and again and again after being broken. It is in community where no matter how lost and bewildered we may be, it is in community where we find home and a place of unconditional belonging. In these past 8 years, I've witnessed the emeralds gleam upon the stories of this community, revealing a place of nourishment, hope, infinite possibility, and most of all, a people who are ever thriving. Being able to tell the stories of South Seattle these past 8 years has been a pleasure and a privilege without parallel. And our story, our collective story, is far from over. In the years to come, we will continue to create ripples that make waves of change throughout our community and this country. In the years to come, we will continue to ignite sparks that combat all the darkness that is around us. I very much look forward to it. Thank you.
Happy 8th anniversary to the South Seattle Emerald. Man, the ripples from the Emerald can be felt throughout our city, man. Y'all give journalists like me a platform to speak straight to the community and to tell the stories of our community from the perspective of our community, man. And it's very, very important that we get to share our own stories and make sure that they're represented well. South Seattle Emerald has done a great job just giving us a platform and a place to do that. I am very appreciative and excited, man. 8 years, that is a wonderful, wonderful accomplishment. And I'm looking forward to the years to come, man. South Seattle Emerald, thank you. I appreciate you, Mike Dad.
Hi, South Seattle Emerald. The ripple effect of your work encourages voices that may normally not speak up or be heard to light up this world and use their voice and share their stories. And that work is so vital to our community. So thank you and happy anniversary to everyone. Be blessed.
Happy birthday, South Seattle Emerald, from everybody at Seattle Arts and Lectures. As a fellow word-based organization, we appreciate everything that you do to lift up the words and stories of our community. Happy birthday!
Hello, my name is Stone Gossard, and I'm honored to be able to congratulate Marcus and Jesse and everybody at the South Seattle Emerald for 8 amazing, successful, impactful years. You've created a vehicle for communication within our community that reaches folks that weren't being reached and that connects folks that weren't being connected. And we thank you so much for your energy, your passion, your compassion. Thank you so much on behalf of myself and Pearl Jam. We are honored to be part of this event. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to our 8th anniversary celebration. I am still Marcus Harrison Green, and you are in for quite a treat. Because today, as we celebrate 8 years of the Emerald making ripples and sparks here at home and beyond our community, we have musical guests, we have amazing interviews, we have magical moments. But first, we have our own Emerald board member, Lucas Draper, who is going to show you how to concoct a wonderful signature Emerald cocktail. I do have to put a disclaimer out there that if you're going to imbibe, do so responsibly, but go ahead and imbibe. Now, without further ado, here's Lucas.
Hi, my name is Lucas Draper. I'm a member of the South Seattle Emerald Board, and today I'm going to show you how to make a classic cocktail called the Midori Sour. Midori came to us in 1978 and got its start at Studio 54, a happening nightclub in New York City. Over the years, it got kind of a low-brow reputation, mostly due to it being mixed with more sugary sour mixes as opposed to the fresh fruit juices, which it was intended to be mixed with and enjoyed. So I'm going to show you how to make that cocktail today. So first we're going to take our Midori. We're going to do 2 ounces of Midori. Then you're going to add half an ounce of fresh lime juice. And half an ounce of lemon. We're going to add our ice. We'll give that a quick stir. And top it off with a little club soda. Finish that off with a nice lemon garnish. And you have yourself a Midori Sour. Enjoy. If you'd like to make a non-alcoholic version of this cocktail, just replace the Midori with fresh melon juice. You can use cantaloupe, honeydew, any melon will do. And add some citrus juice, top it off with some soda water, and you've got yourself a non-alcoholic version of the Midori Sour.
Peace, everybody. Giving a big shout out to the South Seattle Emerald on their 8th anniversary. It's been a privilege and an honor. The ripple effect, of course, that you've had in our community is just bringing more positive stories and allowing our community to tell our stories authentically from the voice of the people on the grassroots level. So much love to the whole Emerald family. Marcus, on your journey.
South Seattle Emerald. I know firsthand the ripples that you make are felt far and wide, far beyond the borders of South Seattle. This community is everywhere, and people find home here at the Emerald and community here. They see themselves here. They have a voice here. It's a truly special thing. Thank you for making light even in the darkest times. The ripples and sparks you make are beautiful, and I thank you. Happy 8th.
Man, what isn't the ripple effect of the Emerald? I believe it has to be the fact that it has touched community in a way that has been powerful and palpable. I think it's given voice to people. I think it's given hope to people, and I think it's created a way that has really shown a spotlight on what South Seattle is and who the people of South Seattle are. I think it's lit up a dark place because I think it's been a voice for the voiceless so many times, and I think it is shown in a way that is been community-centered, community-focused, and community caring. And I think it will continue to be that, and it'll be true journalism for the people, by the people, all those other great cliches. And I think it will continue to be a light in an unlit room, and hopefully it will be the spark that begins to spark other truth in a time in which truth is sometimes optional. But the Emerald isn't, and the Emerald is consistently that light, and we need it. And I'm so grateful for it in the leadership and everything it's been and everything it continue to be. So happy 8th. Here's to many more.
Happy 8th anniversary, South Seattle Emerald. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to support you over the past 8 years. Thank you so much for understanding the power and the necessity of representation, making sure that the stories that are shared and the issues that are presented are done so from a perspective and a voice that are familiar and known to those of us who love and support South Seattle. I want to especially say thank you for making sure that voices like that of Sharon Ho Chang, award-winning Taiwanese American journalist, photographer, and activist come through in curated stories. And thank you so much for making Asian Americans face a lot of struggle and danger, that we are not rendered invisible and our stories are not rendered invisible. Thank you for involving us and knitting us into the fabric of the communities to which we belong. Thank you so much, Emerald. Looking forward to the next 8 years. And if you're not a rainmaker yet, I hope you will know the joy and the power and the sense of community that comes from becoming one this year.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce National Book Award winner, scholar, academic, educator, philosopher, cartoonist, author of The Middle Passage, which belongs in the canonical text of American literature. His new collection, The Eightfold Path, is currently out right now. He does with words what John Coltrane does with his saxophone, meaning he makes beauty wherever he goes and is. I'm not sure how this man does not have a messianic complex, but he does not. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the legendary Charles Johnson. Mr. Johnson, how are you doing today, sir?
Thank you, Marcus. Pretty good. Like you said earlier, it's the day after my birthday, so I spent the day relaxing and thinking about life and just, having a feeling of gratitude that I've been around for such a long time and still working.
Yes, and we are all glad that you are still around as well. I always tell people, I tell my brother, he's a Tupac fan, and so there's this line in Tupac's song that Marvin Gaye had him thinking that black was the thing to be, and I'm always like, man, that's that is Charles Johnson for me. That's what your words have done for me. So thank you, sir. Well, I know you don't have a ton of time, so I did want to get into a question here. I wanted to ask you. You often reference writer and poet D.H. Lawrence when he talks about the spirit of place.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, he talks about the importance of a location and its possibilities, or lack thereof. And every time I hear about the spirit of place, I can't help but think about my community of South Seattle. I remember when I first started the Emerald, I remember talking to a young man. I was asking people, going on the street, asking people what they loved about South Seattle, what they loved about the Rainier Valley. I remember him saying, nothing, because there's nothing good that they say about us. And he called himself a savage, saying that that's what other people called him and talked about, and essentially labeled him. And 2 weeks later, about roughly 2 weeks later, I found out that that young man was shot and killed. And I always think about, what if there had been something else there? What if there had been another story there? What if the Emerald had existed in its current form? And I know one story might not make a difference, but I can't say that it couldn't have. And so, as I ask you, as a writer, and a journalist, what is our role, right, in crafting possibilities for people, even when they themselves might not be able to see those possibilities?
Oh, that's a very rich question. That's such a tragic story about the young man that you just described. And yet, unfortunately, that's a story being repeated all over the country, in too many places. I'm from the Midwest, a suburb of Chicago, and that story happens too often in South Chicago and West Chicago, in my opinion. Now, in the late 60s and early 70s, I was a journalist. I was trained as a journalist to work on newspapers, to be a newspaper person, right? So when I was going through J school, journalism school, our professors emphasized to us the importance of the press, of newspapers being a check and a guard on government and something that provides information to the people. The Constitution begins, we the people, right? But who is going to give the people the information they need to make intelligent, choices when time comes from voting, using the franchise. The newspaper tradition has always seen itself in that light as a provider of information. And if you look at what's going on right now in Russia, where information is just suppressed, there's only state-sanctioned information about what's happening in Ukraine. So the people there can't even get correct information. So the role of the press is enormous. Now, I can segue from that general statement to talk about the Black press, which was very important all during the period of segregation, right? From the late 19th century all the way through the 20th century. As a cartoonist and illustrator, I published a good deal of my work in publications like Ebony and Jet and Black World, the publications coming out of Johnson publications in Chicago, and other Black publications as well. Proud Magazine in St. Louis, any number of them. And what those newspapers did, the Black press, was provide the information to the community that they could not find in the mainstream press, like the Chicago Tribune or the New York Times or the Washington Post. They provided information about the community for the community, written by people in the community.
Right.
So there's a crucial role that the Emerald plays in terms of the tradition, that I think it fits within. If that young man could have seen something in the Emerald that would have given him a portrait of himself far greater than that of being a savage, right? And helped him to see that in his community, despite whatever problems it might have, there were good people doing good things. That I think would have been an antidote, at least that's my hope, and a corrective. And if he didn't want to see it in a news article, maybe it would be there in an editorial cartoon or in a comic strip, in some form that he could absorb and get him thinking about himself in a different way.
Yes. Well, thank you, sir. You always leave me with so much potent information and and reflection. I want to move quickly to the next question that I had for you. There's a great James Baldwin quote. You and him are 1A and 1B in my book, by the way. Just
yeah, Mr. Baldwin, yeah.
But he talks about, reading so that you would know that you're not alone in the world. And I see this, you touched on it a little bit earlier. You talked about sort of the state of the world we find ourselves in now. And there is a lot of tumult. There's a lot of social and political, carnage going on at the moment. And so I want to ask, and I don't mean to sound too corny, but how do we write in a way? How do we create a journalism or just storytelling, that transcends even journalism, so that people know that they are loved and that other people are worthy of love, right? How do we practice sort of a healing, if you will, through our storytelling, right? We've just had this, 2 years of, or more, I should say, of grief and so on and so forth with the pandemic and everything else is going on. But, you don't, I think it's Cornel West who said, you don't storm the Capitol, right? If you feel like I believe you are loved and others are worthy, you don't put your knee on a man's neck for 8 minutes, nor gun him down while he is jogging, if you believe he is worthy of love. So,
well, my simple answer to that has to do with the kind of stories that we tell, the kind of stories that we choose to tell. I personally believe, I've written a lot of different things, and some were assignments, some of things that I created on my own, but I really try to profile those aspects of the human experience that are life affirmative, that are about people, for example, who I find admirable and whom we can learn from. For example, I did a lot of work, maybe a fifth of my life, writing about Martin Luther King Jr., a novel called Dreamer in 1998, a short story called Dr. King's Refrigerator. I did a book called The Photobiography of Martin Luther King Jr. with civil rights photographer, the late Bob Adelman. I think we have models from our ancestors and our predecessors that show the greatest degree of heroism, courage, nobility, and significance in transforming this country so it is a freer place for everybody here, for people who didn't come here until the late 60s, when the immigration law was changed in 1965. So it's a matter of, what do you choose to write? Is it going to be affirmative? Is it going to give somebody transform their perception, the liberation of their perception, so that they do not have any sense whatsoever of what their people who don't like them, how they would like to portray them. I hope that makes sense, some sense.
Yes, it did. It actually brings me to my next question for you. Although I was personally pleased by seeing some of the apologies that are going on by our legacy media, such as the Kansas City Star, that has apologized for some of its racist reporting in the past, along with the Seattle Times that did a recent project called A1 Revisited. I just can't help but wonder if we have things that are elemental to American society, right, where we have racism in our past, sexism, narcissism, rapaciousness. How can we reprogram this society, if you will, so that it's less of an extension of what society has been, and how do we become what society can be, meaning, more egalitarian, more equitable, and also a society that just isn't scared of the truth, isn't scared of dealing with its past.
Okay, well, I have to say something up front. I've said before, and I've certainly thought about it a lot. I don't think we will ever be able in this world to eliminate racism.
Right.
I think it's always going to be there, unfortunately, as a structure of lived experience. The reason I say that is because I think for the person who thinks in a racist way, it's their racism is tied to their ego. It's tied to their own sense of personal identity and to their fears. The corrective, I think, is in twofold at least. One is education, and I mean K through 12, education that allows our young people to have a much broader sense of their identity than just a group identity, right? And they can empathize and identify and connect with other human beings who, quote unquote, don't look like them. Education is critical to this. And that means it's also critical to the preparation of journalists, and people in the media. If we fail as educators, then we're going to fail those young people who go out into different forms of media and any other sort of profession. I tend to be an optimist, and I tend to be an idealist in the sense that I do believe a percentage of the population at any time will awaken and will think critically. It won't be 100% of the population. That's maybe asking for too much, right? But a significant part of the population can become enlightened, and they can then begin to do the work that will, from one generation to the other, encourage greater humanity and compassion for others. My general sense of human beings in general is that they want to be good people. They like to help their neighbors. They don't care what the color of their neighbor is. They're positive people. Something correct Scott King said, I think, is important for this question. She was asked, what did she and Martin Luther King not tell people that she thinks that she should have told them? And her reply was this. She said, well, we fought for all these different things, but we didn't tell them that they would have to fight all over again for them. That it wasn't once and for all to achieve the Civil Rights Act of 64 or the Voting Rights Act of 65, but they would have to fight these battles again themselves from generation to generation.
Yeah. I just sitting with that at this moment in our history.
It's a torch that's passed to us from our predecessors, and it's a responsibility that we have to always keep the good, the true, and the beautiful before our reading public, our audiences, and those things that will counteract, terrible acts of evil. I'm thinking again of Ukraine right now, that just the things I've read, the horrific, awful things that really do constitute evil, in my opinion. But that's a closed society. It's one where they cannot get alternate views. Ours is an open society relative to Russia and some certain other places. And the role of the journalist in that and the writer in that, I think, is crucially important.
Yes. Well, I would say that I do share your optimism as well, that no, we may not be able to get everybody, but we can get enough people.
Exactly. We can get enough. One of the things that when I talk about Martin Luther King Jr., I emphasize three things in my novel Dreamer that I felt were important to him. One is that nonviolence was not supposed to be just a strategy for demonstrations, but a way of life. Congressman John Lewis would emphasize that it was intended to be a way of life. Second thing that I emphasize in King is his belief in integration as the life's blood of being. Our lives are already far more integrated than we even realize at times. But the third thing for King as a theologian that was important was something called agape. Agape is the love that God has supposedly for humans, for men and women. It's an unconditional love. It's the kind of love that a mother has for her child, unconditional. But here's the trick. It's a teleological love, teleological meaning that there's a goal, that you're aware that this person is going to change. For example, as a father, I have two kids and they were growing up, and sometimes in their teens, they were a little bit difficult. Okay, so I could say, my daughter did something today. I just don't like her today, but I love her. I love her, and I know she's going through a transition, and she's going to come out on the other side, and that's my job to help her do that, right? So what you love is the potential in the other human being,
Yes.
the potential that they have to change. And another example, for example, George Wallace was very unlovable. George Wallace.
I would say so.
But the members of the civil rights movement said, look, he might change, and he did in the 70s. So a teleological love is one that will be patient and help encourage those people having a hard time because of something that happened in their own life, hard time getting to the community of the compassion and the enlightened. So a teleological love is there with King.
I will definitely say that there are some current day public figures that that is very hard to practice with.
You wonder about.
But
you don't know if they'll ever get there. Right.
Well, sir, and thank you so much for your time. My final question for you today is, you talk about potential and possibility. And so I want to ask you this. What possibility do you see now for our Black communities, our communities of color in this city and in this region? I know so many people in South Seattle are sort of have concern about the future. What does it look like? What does our city look like? For you, what are the peak possibilities that you can imagine for us as a community?
Well, I think this is a rich time at this moment. I mean, it's a strange time. It's a dangerous time, not just for South Seattle, but for America and Black people in America. But I do think that the possibilities are there for individuals to move forward and realize their potential, and groups as well. It's kind of like yin and yang, in a certain sense. It's a little bit of darkness in the light and a little bit of light in the darkness. It's always good to keep that perspective. There are opportunities. And so again, I remain optimistic and hopeful.
All right. Well, Mr. Johnson, thank you again, sir, for blessing us all with your time. You are a living legend. I say that I don't believe in heroes because it's troublesome and problematic to heroize anybody, but you are my hero, sir. You are the exception that proves the rule. So.
You are a kind man, but I would say there's a hero in everybody. There's a hero in every single one, and that's what we want to ignite and bring forward in every child, every girl, every boy, to bring forth the hero in them. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. From Skyway to Rainier Beach to Seward Park to Columbia City to Beacon Hill and every neighborhood in between, South Seattle houses a one-of-a-kind community filled with beauty, strength, courage, kindness, fierceness, innovation, salvation, determination, and diversity. But for much too long, the stories reported about us have been written without us. For too long, the news reported on our community has been one-dimensional, focused on our crimes and heartaches, but rarely our joys and triumphs. That's why the Emerald exists, to illuminate our community for all it is. Journalism by, for, and to the community. Together, we can shine a brighter light on South Seattle. Together, we are the stories we tell ourselves. And our story, our true, authentic story, is magnificent South Seattle. Highlighting brilliant artists has been a calling card of the Emerald for these past 8 years. So it gives me great pleasure to highlight one more brilliant artist, Intisar. Here she is singing Dracula. Enjoy.
This song is called Dracula. and you drink me like petals for the sun. Whoa, Caligula of my pilfered heart, corrupted king of the dying art. When she's withholding, you can make her give it all. And when she's folding, you know the rest of her will fall. And you look like heaven made of gold, and you drink me like petals for the sun. Oh no, and you look like heaven made of gold. You drink me like petals for the sun. Petals from the sun. Heaven in the
Happy birthday, South Seattle Emerald. Congratulations on 8 incredible years of serving our South End communities and amplifying the perspectives and voices of those of us that live here. Deeply grateful to be in community with you all, and I hope you know just how singular the coverage that you are doing is to this region, truly unlike any other outlet currently. So much love to everybody on the team there at the Emerald, and yeah, can't wait to see what this next turn around the sun might bring. Bye!
Hey folks, Alex Garland here, photographer and writer for the South Seattle Emerald. I've been with the Emerald for almost 8 years now, and over those 8 years the Emerald has given me many opportunities to share some of the brightness that comes from the South End. And I've been incredibly thankful to be a part of such a strong community organization that cares so much about the people in the area. I would recommend you contributing as much as you can financially to the Emerald because that's what keeps us going. Thanks so much.
I'm Angela Castañeda, a committed rainmaker. I was born in Seattle, live on Beacon Hill, and love to stay tuned hyperlocal. So I'm proud to support the Emerald's great team and mission to lift voices, tell the stories of Southeast Seattle. Whether you consider yourself a Seattleite or are just getting settled here, I invite you to join me in supporting community journalism.
I am so glad to be joined by Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, also the former state senator of the 37th district, and just a wonderful person all around. My mother, Mama Green, wanted to make sure that I worked that in. So, Mama, I know you're watching, and I did. Uh, Congresswoman, how are you doing today?
I am great. And I have to say, it's wonderful to see you, Marcus. And I've got to say, Mama Green, it's great to see you as well. I will never forget stopping in at your house and door knocking when I was running for my state Senate campaign. That's how we first met. So,
Yes, and to share another story, I remember when the Emerald first started, you were pretty much at that time, you were our biggest story at that time, and our biggest interview, I should say. And I remember interviewing you. You're running for the state Senate, and interview goes well, and I'm like, please don't let her ask one question. How many readers do we have? And you say, just in passing, yeah. So how many folks does your site reach? And at that point, right, I'm just starting out, and so I'm honest with you, and I say, well, if you include me, myself, and my mother, that's 3 people. And I'm thinking you're about to be like, whatever with this, and you're like, well, I need all the votes I can get. So. I just have always, thanked you for that. And, at this point, it's 8 years later, and, here we are, a site with more than 2 million views per year. And you're at the, at the top of the political hierarchy at this point. So,
well, I really, I think I wanted to do it with you, if I remember this, because I really believe in supporting local journalism. And here was somebody who was rooted in the community, who wanted to cover, at the time when you were starting, the South Seattle community. And I remember just thinking how beautiful that was and how important it was, because we just don't have enough of that. And so I have really appreciated the way you've dug in at the Emerald to the community there, and bring forward all these really important issues and voices. So I'm glad that I was at the very beginning with the first 3. And now, now you're such a big platform and doing wonderful things.
yeah, well, thank you. I wanted to ask you, you talk about grassroots journalism. Now you are seems like MSNBC and CNN should be paying you for your own show. You're on there so often. I'm like, are you getting residuals? That being said, you've obviously been in a situation where you've gone from the state house here in Seattle to you're over at the White House now in Congress. What is the continued importance and maintenance of a truly grassroots community-based journalistic outfit, especially in comparison to some of these national outfits?
Well, as you see, I said yes to you right away. And I say yes to local papers right away. And we always make time for our local radio, TV, newspapers, because local journalism carries a whole different weight for people, because they're digging into issues that are near and dear to your hearts with a very local flair, right? You want to know about the things that are happening in your local communities. You get the news about local festivals, things that MSNBC would not cover. Rachel Maddow, as wonderful as she is, does not cover those things. And so I think you cannot replace local journalism with anything else. And unfortunately, Marcus, what's happened is, a lot of local journalism has really suffered because of the big tech platforms that have taken away the ad revenue. So if you look at Google or Facebook, they now control those platforms. They're dominant. They control the platforms, and they control the prices and the buying and the selling of ad revenue, which means that local newspapers, local journalists don't get that revenue. And it's put a lot of papers out of business. And it's why it's really important that we tackle this in a few different ways. And that's what I'm trying to do in Congress. But one of my commitments is I make time for local press, always.
Yes, you always have, from when I was in my mother's basement to now that I'm in my friend's basement. I mean, it shows you how much of how lucrative the journalism industry is. I kid. That being said, you talked a little bit about some of the issues that journalism as a whole is facing and this industry is facing. One of them is obviously consolidation. It seems like the business model that most successful quote unquote organizations has is either you're a New York Times and you have this long legacy, or you are bought out by a hedge fund and you know, they strip it down for parts. How can we ensure you know, a good, you know, lifeline, if you will, you know, for local journalism? And what are some of the things you're doing to help tackle that?
Yeah, well, we have a number of bills on kind of, you know, providing support in different ways to support local journalists. I think it's called the Preserving Journalism Act. I forget, Journalism Competition and Preservation Act of 2021. And this would sort of direct some resources and some opportunities towards local journalism. But the bigger piece that I've really spent 16 months of an antitrust investigation working on is antitrust legislation, because our argument is that these platforms and the consolidation, the market concentration of power, you mentioned hedge funds, private equity firms, but also these dominant platforms like Google and Facebook, they are too big and they control everything. It would be like, you know, if you were, you know, if you're playing a football game, you design the rules of the game, you make the rules of the game, you're on the field as the ref calling the plays, you know, calling what's fair and what's not, and you're playing on the field on one of the teams. It's just not fair. You have all the advantages. And so I have a bill called the Ending Platform Monopolies Act that would break up these big tech platforms and would not allow you to have these dual interests that really unfairly interfere. And so that would fix the Google ad revenue situation. And that would really, I think, be able to energize a lot of our local media again.
Yes, well, I will say I'll throw my weight behind saying people should definitely advocate as much as they can and help with that. That being said, you did mention obviously some of the social media giants and juggernauts with the Facebooks and Twitters and so on. And I believe a former president, who I will not name, has his own social media now. I think maybe there are two people on that one. But that being said, we do live in a time now where if one person says, you know, Tuesday follows Monday, another person is going to disagree. How, you know, and I've seen polls that says that, you know, many media outlets have an approval rating actually less than Congress at this point. So how can we, you know, as a media organization, as, you know, folks who want to just know the truth and know that, you know, there's authentic information out there, how do we continue to, you know, make sure that we aren't necessarily getting, I guess you could say, radicalized by the various things that we see on various media outlets?
Well, I think the first thing is actually caring about the truth, putting a premium on the truth. There's too much out there that is trying to go quickly, and so they just take whatever is out there and then they repackage it, right? I think that this is one of the things, I think, with local journalism, you have the ability to actually go to the truth and put a premium on the truth. For people who are consumers of news, it's really important to check what you read. I've had it happen to me, and I'm a pretty educated consumer in terms of news, but I've had it happen to me where I see something or somebody sends me something and I think it's true. And then if I delve into it, I find out it's not true at all. And so I think it's really important, if you're a consumer of news, to check your sources. You can have 3 or 4 reliable places that you go that can include independent press, and check the things that you read. I think if you're on the news producing side, as you are, it's really important to make sure that anything you're talking about and quoting is backed up, and that you know, I think you're not just taking something that's out there and repackaging it when you don't know if it's true or not. To me, that's the most important thing. It's the premium on truth. And today, it's a premium on speed. It's a premium on clickbait. It's a premium on, you know, whatever catches somebody's attention first, and not actually on the truth.
Right. Well, I guess I have to check that link that I just got about Kanye remarrying am, but so
I mean, a little good gossip never hurt anybody.
here, here. That being said, you are an elected official, but you're also a woman of color. And can you share a little bit about sort of what your opinions are of, we say in journalism, especially some of the legacy media, that, the job is to hold power to account and so forth. But it does seem at some times that, elected officials of color do have to, as they say, what's the old saying, that Ginger Rogers has to do everything that Fred Astaire has to do, but backwards in high heels and gets more scrutiny than Fred Astaire. Can you talk a little bit about that and what your experience has been as a woman of color in a very high position?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be the first the first and only South Asian American woman elected to Congress. I really don't want to be the last. I'm honored that I'm one of only less than 90 women of color that have ever served in Congress, Marcus. Not just now, I'm talking ever since the history of our country. But I really don't want to say that number again. I would really like that number to be much higher. And so I know, and this has been true throughout my life, when I was in the state Senate, when I first met you, I was the only woman of color in the state Senate at that time. And I know what it is like to be in that position. And you will never see me unprepared. It's why I'm so tough on myself and anybody who works with me. I always want to be extra prepared because I'm never going to find myself in a conversation where somebody says something and I don't know what they're talking about, because it's happened to us too much, where that simple thing that could happen to a white man and nothing would be said of that comes to mean a stereotype of me as a woman of color. And so I've been very conscious of that. I'm very prepared. I do my homework. I know that everything I say will be taken in a different way. And I think that in some ways as I've gotten older and as I've reached higher positions, I now am happy that people underestimate me. I find it to be my secret weapon, because they look at me and they think I'm very young. I don't know what I'm talking about. And then I can whip out all the things I know. And it isn't long before they realize they're not going to walk over me. But yes, it's hard. And I also have this memory of, I had just gotten to the state Senate and I was meeting with a wonderful group of wise Black elders, women, mostly women. And one of them said, "Senator Jayapal," and I said, "Oh, call me Pramila." And she looked at me and she said, "Do not ever do that." She said, "Do you know how hard I worked to get you into the position of senator?" She said, "I am going to say senator with pride." And I've never forgotten that, because our positions here aren't just for us, right? They are meaningful for somebody else. Yeah. And so I think about her all the time. I don't remember her name or anything like that, but I've often thought that what she was trying to tell me is, do not ever yourself diminish the position you have. And she was using the name. I still have people call me Pramila, but I can't quite let that go. But I think it comes through in a number of different ways. Don't underestimate the power. Use the power you have, as somebody once wrote.
Yes. Well, I had one more question for you, but I'm just going to leave it there because that was a perfect mic drop. I will just ask you really quickly. Obviously, you have a tremendous amount of love for the South Seattle Emerald readership and this geographic location and community. Can you just give some parting words of wisdom, for our audience here on our 8th anniversary?
Absolutely. And let me just say congratulations to the South Seattle Emerald and to you for founding it. It has been such a source of information, community, truth, perspective, so many things about the South Seattle area and kind of the roots from which we emerge. And I'm so proud to have been a tiny part of it at the very beginning, and to be supporting this community that you've built long into the future, and with many millions more views. I see that coming.
Yes, and as you said, Congresswoman, you don't have a give up bone in your body, and that was the first article that we wrote about you, and I will say that's something that I have taken to heart all these years, and I just want to thank you for your contributions to us and to years ahead here.
Thank you so much, Marcus.
Hey, South Seattle Emerald family. I'm Shayna Shepherd, and I want to wish you a happy 8th anniversary. I have so much love for you. Love to you, Marcus, and to this incredible, incredible organization. It's my pleasure to give you all a little bit of taste of music from my home. This is a special request. I love the fragrance of your voice, the color of Oluo. My favorite sound is your smile, intoxicated with joyful. I am moved by you. Oh, I am moved by you. Oh, I am moved by you. Oh, I am moved by you. I feel you on the bottom of my feet, the very blush in my cheek. I love the taste of the words you don't say. You are the meaning of peace. I'm 1,000 fatal fly unfolding in this moment. Yeah, I feel so vulnerable and so empowered. It's everything, it's nothing, it's perfect. Oh, I am moved by you. Oh, I am moved by you. Oh, I am moved by you.
It is so great to be joined by New York Times bestseller, a Humanist of the Year by the Humanist magazine. I believe you were Queen of Sheba in a former life. That's what my astrologer just told me, and we know that's true. And maybe one of the greatest achievements of your storied career, you are the secretary on the Emerald's board. And yes, you be taking notes every single meeting. And I got to tell you, you are the most overqualified board secretary in the history of nonprofit. So just thank you so much. It is so great to be joined by you, Ijeoma Oluo. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Yes. Well, my friend, I know that you are a very busy person. You have a wedding coming up as well. Congratulations to you and your extremely lucky fiance. And thank you for the invitation, by the way. I want to start off with a question, looking at the state of this world as it is right now. I remember, first when we first started at the Emerald, talking about wanting to employ restorative journalism, restorative storytelling. And yet, as I continue to look at this world, especially this last 2 years, I keep wondering, like, what is there to be restored, right? Is it, is it the fact that Black folks die, have a lower lifespan than their white counterparts? Is it lower wealth levels? Is it that our trans kinfolk continue to face such harrowing circumstances and so forth? And what I've kind of moved to is a transformative journalism, or journalism that is liberating. So how do we, Ijeoma, come to a journalism and a storytelling that is pervasively transformative?
I think that it is really important to recognize a lot of the roots of traditional journalism and how harmful it has been. So you can recognize patterns that a lot of people have normalized. But then I think it's also really important to recognize how, I've said this before, nobody suffers in silence, right? And we have used storytelling, and by storytelling, I don't necessarily mean fiction, although fiction can sometimes be quite more honest than what you would read in newspapers. We've used telling the story of what happened to counter a lot of the abuses in the world, to counter a lot of the narratives that are untrue about us out there. And places that acknowledge that acknowledge the ways in which, quote unquote, traditional journalism, and I'm saying that in quotes because that's culturally specific, right? We have our own traditions of storytelling. W.E.B. Du Bois, and all these people going into places and saying, this is what happened here, right? In our way, and telling stories about who we are. All of that is our tradition as well. And so I think that it's where we are heard and seen, and where we understand and write from the idea that we matter because we are here, because we exist or existed, and our story matters, and that we are capable of interpreting the world around us and how it impacts us. And we are capable of translating that to other people. Is a revolutionary act within journalism, when so much of what many people are used to has started from the premise that only certain people are capable of doing that, and that they will do that for us.
Amen. Well, thank you. I got to also ask you, now we're in this sort of intensified discussion about quote unquote free speech, right? And what I've noticed is that it just seems like most of this stuff, this sort of babble and pablum around it, especially sort of kind of encapsulated by an infantile billionaire, in my opinion, attempting to buy a social media network. Why is there continue to be sort of so much intensity around quote unquote free speech, meaning like anybody can say what, very deplorable people, I should say, should be able to say anything on any platform, versus instead a more intensified conversation around how do we get folks who have continuously been pushed to the margins of our society, continuously ignored by our society, how can we elevate them and their voices? Why is that not the conversation, that's being, had as intensely as a faux conversation about free speech?
Well, what I would actually say is what we're seeing right now is that we have two different conversations working together in tandem that are hypocritical. And a lot of people think it doesn't make sense, but it actually makes perfect sense. So we have this argument that free speech is under threat, right? And by free speech, what people are saying is white supremacist, patriarchal, violent speech is under threat. And at the same time, our children are under threat from the speech of Black people, trans people, disabled people that's being taught in schools, right? So the narrative here, these are the same people, right? The same people yelling that critical race theory is a threat to children, and all of those books, including my own, need to be pulled out and need to be banned, are the same people arguing that getting suspended from Twitter for saying things that actually do put people in danger is a violation of free speech. And so when we get to the core of it, what we recognize is the motivation. And the motivation is for white supremacy and the violent patriarchy and ableism that goes along with it to operate with impunity and to have the ability to force people into conforming. And they force it both ways. They will force it by targeting marginalized voices online and threatening marginalized voices and normalizing that threatening in real life as well, and by removing marginalized voices through legislation, through protests, through all of these different ways in which they're targeting our voices in these spaces. And so it's no shock to me that the call has never been, how can we get more marginalized voices if we care about free speech? Because the argument really does boil down to what allows violent white supremacy to operate with impunity. And that's the motivation. And it really has nothing to do with speech either way, because they will come just as hard for white people who violate these kind of white supremacist ideals as well in their speech.
Well, speaking of white supremacy, I know that you call it a pyramid and Ponzi scheme, meaning that, you know, the more people seem to pay into it, right, the less they continue to get out of it. How can we extract? Yeah, you know, because you know, many times media just serves as a tool and a continued projection and perpetuation of white supremacy.
I think that it's vital that we recognize. I think one of the most powerful things we can do in media in trying to counter this is just to be very clear about what is the argument we're willing to have. And one thing that I do really appreciate the Emerald for is the Emerald, of course, will call attention to things that it sees throughout Seattle, to things that its contributors see throughout Seattle. It will raise awareness and celebrate some of the amazing things that are happening in the community that don't get highlighted, but it will not get into a debate about the humanity of people of color, disabled people, trans people, queer people, poor people, people who suffer with addiction, you know, people who are homeless. It won't get into that debate because that debate legitimizes it. And I think that that's one of the most important things we can do. And if we are lucky enough to say that one day history will be recorded by people who know better, and that's a toss-up whether that will happen. What we will see, if done right, is the way in which so much media was an active participant in the rise of this type of violent white supremacist patriarchy by legitimizing the idea that we still need to debate history, we still need to debate our humanity, we still need to debate whether or not people deserve to live safely, and whether or not people, you know, deserve protection and services and food and shelter. We participate. When we participate in that debate, we legitimize it. And so one of the most important things I actually think we need to do, a lot of times people think it's an action we need to take, as in we need to be out there constantly tackling that narrative. And what I think is more important actually is to say, in this space, that's not even valid. And there's so much other things we need to be talking about, so many more actions we could be taking, that we're being distracted by this debate, that instead we're going to talk about what's actually happening here, who we need to be talking to, what we need to be uplifting, what we need to be pushing aside, and not getting into this debate over whether or not it's even a thing we need to be addressing. We know it is. And I think if there's one thing we could do, that any journalist who thinks that their work can improve the world is to be as cognizant as possible as to what we legitimize through debate.
Amen to that. I know you usually don't have a ton of time, so I just had two quick questions for you. One is, I was recently watching We Crash. It's about WeWork and Adam Newman and all the zaniness that went on there. And then I was watching the Dropout about Elizabeth Holmes, and how she helped, scammed folks, saying that she had this machine that, with a few droplets of blood could to do all of this. So it just seems in my mind that you got a whole host of charismatic, messianic, folks, white folks who, can get billions of dollars. And we over here trying to do what we're trying to do. And we have been scraping by for 8 years. How can we stress to people the importance of giving, to nonprofit, people of color run, operated, and focused media?
That's a great question. I wrote a lot about this in my book Mediocre, about the fact that we have this myth about what greatness is in America. And it's the independent actor who knows something nobody else knows and does all these things. And the truth is that we couldn't be further from the truth as to what actually moves us forward as a society. And it's been incredibly integral to populations of color, right? This is our culture to work together. But it is also just true if you look at what cities are working well and moving ahead and have the most innovation. What you see is an open culture of collaboration. You see people doing things together. It is vital to recognize that if we don't support spaces that bring people in and provide opportunities that value different voices and ideas, that understand that we get through this together as a community, when we don't put into that, what we're actually putting into is this kind of scam of hyper-individualism, this flashiness that says, we're waiting for the one person to beat all the odds and make it ahead, and then we'll give them what we can. Instead of saying we're going to do what we can to make sure that we have the greatest chance of the most amazing talent and voices in a space to come forward. And part of the reason why I wanted to be on the board of the Emerald is because as a writer in Seattle, as a lifelong Seattleite, Seattle really does love to live in that we do things on our own culture. And that is white Seattle, which can be the story of Seattle just because of how white the city is. Recognizing how different your experience in the city can be if you are integrated in the communities of color that have always had to come together to get by, and the poor communities that have had to come together to get by, right? Because this is poor people in the city of all races and ethnicities are written out of the story of this prosperous city as well. When you recognize how we live, how we survive, how we come together, and how rich our experience can be when we lean into that, the Emerald is one of the few places out there that wants not only to tell that story, but participate in that by elevating voices. So many people I know, the first time they ever got a piece published was at the Emerald. So often, if a story needs to be told about our community, and people will say, take it to the Emerald, take it to the Emerald, because they know that it has the best chance of not only even getting published, but being published in a way that will tell the story right and responsibly, and will reach an audience that will respond in a way that can make a real difference. That, I think a lot of times people assume that love and passion can make up for funds, and that's not true. and a lot of people don't understand that the Emerald has many of the same financial needs that any other publication has. And that part of this commitment to community means a commitment to paying people who contribute. It means a commitment to all of the people who make it what it is. And if you get from that, if you get a sense of community from reading it, like I do and so many others do, understand then that the Emerald is a part of your community, and we support the Emerald like we support the rest of our community. And we know that the Emerald supports us as well by giving a space for our voices, helping the careers and the talents of so many people who otherwise wouldn't have space. It's a really valuable place, and there isn't another place like it in the city. And that is why it's the only board I'm on, because it really matters to me.
Yeah, and you certainly matter to us. And I just got to double down on what you said about, love and passion. It doesn't necessarily make up for funds. That's why I have a brick wall behind me in my background. and you got the background you got. But anyway, last question for you. This is the 8th anniversary of the Emerald. I know sometimes it feels like 88 in terms of the work that we have all put into it. But what would you like to be able to say about the Emerald 8 years from now in terms of its continued impact on our, not just our city, but our larger region, the South Seattle diaspora, if you will, and knowing that folks will, unfortunately, some folks will have to move out of their historic home of South Seattle, but still be attached to us. What do you want to be able to say about the ripples and sparks that we continue to create 8 years from now?
I want the Emerald to not only be a place where so many amazing writers get their start, but a place where so many people get to stay. And what that means in a place like Seattle, with an economy like Seattle, is being a space that has robust funding and yet can still hold on to who it is in a place that will still always be welcoming and healthy for people who often find quite a hostile reception in more established news spaces. And I would love to see people saying, I got in at the Emerald and I moved up through the Emerald and I've been at the Emerald for 15 years and this is my career. If you work in journalism, you will recognize that those jobs that you think you can keep, that you can raise a family with, go to white men. And I would love the Emerald to be that place. I think the Emerald is so vital right now in its space in providing starts for people. But so often in Seattle, if you want to write, you get your start in these amazing spaces and then you have to leave. You have to leave the city altogether or you have to leave writing. And because the Emerald is so valuable, if people understood and valued that and invested in it, it could be that place. It could be that place where marginalized voices could come and work and grow and build a career and be healthy and happy. And we could watch their work grow. We could watch people turn into mentors. And it could be a huge part of not only the community the way it is now, but a huge part of people's life stories and a huge part of the way journalism looks for people of color, for trans people, for queer people, for disabled people. It can be a part of why you could say, I've been a journalist for 20 years, or I was a journalist and now I've been an editor for 10 years. And so rarely do marginalized people get to say that. And the Emerald could be that place. And I can't think of a better place for it in this region than the Emerald.
I certainly concur. Ijeoma, thank you so very much for your time today, your presence, and not just today, but just for the last 6 years, I believe that you've been a board member for us. You have so often been our conscience at the Emerald. I say you are our Icarus reminder. Meaning, the story is of Icarus that he's not supposed to fly too high, but he's also he's not supposed to fly too low. And we're supposed to have that balance. And you always give us that balance and harmony. So I appreciate you. I love you, my friend. Thank you for loving us at the Emerald. And thank you for all that you continue to do for our community and for our city.
Thank you so much, Marcus. I have so much love for you and for what you have nurtured and created and grown here at the Emerald. I'm so proud to be your friend and I'm so proud to be a part of the Emerald. So thank you. And thank you for reaching out to me and asking me so many years ago to be a part of this. It's been an amazing experience and one that will continue on.
Yeah, much more to come.
From Skyway to Rainier Beach to Seward Park to Columbia City to Beacon Hill and every neighborhood in between, South Seattle houses a one-of-a-kind community filled with beauty, strength, courage, kindness, fierceness, innovation, salvation, determination, and diversity. But for much too long, the stories reported about us have been written without us. For too long, the news reported on our community has been one-dimensional, focused on our crimes and heartaches, but rarely our joys and triumphs. That's why the Emerald exists, to illuminate our community for all it is. Journalism by, for, and to the community. Together, we can shine a brighter light on South Seattle. Together, we are the stories we tell ourselves. And our story, our true, authentic story, is magnificent South Seattle. Even though today marks the 8th anniversary of the Emerald, we wouldn't have lasted 8 days without you. If you have ever shared an article, if you have ever donated to us, if you have ever written a word for us, if you have ever handed out a flyer for us, if you have ever said anything good about us, then that means you have helped create something great. We could not do the Emerald without you. And we promise you that we will be there for you every single day and always, because you are always there for us. As we close out the Emerald's 8th anniversary show, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being there for us. Thank you for supporting us. And thank you for loving us in community.
Hello, my name is Ben Doherty. I'm a longtime Seattle resident. I'd like to take this opportunity to wish the South Seattle Emerald a happy 8th birthday. I'm proud to live in a city that has an institution like this that provides such wonderful journalism integrity. I wish it many, many more years of continued success.
Thank you, South Seattle Emerald, and Marcus especially. The work that you do in community is vital, and no one else is doing it like you, especially during COVID when you were able to share so many important resources and community stories. Thank you.
Hey, South Seattle Emerald, on behalf of the Curiosity-based team,
thank you for elevating unsung heroes,
for featuring different cultures.
Happy birthday!
Shout out to the Seattle Emerald. Happy birthday, representing the South End. And yes, I said South with an F, not a TH. I just want to wish y'all a happy birthday and say thank you for continuing to tell our story from our perspective, for us, by us, South End representing. Every time I personally call, you guys are always right there, willing to give perspective and show light and love to our community. So we want to see this 8-year birthday turn to 10 and 12 and 15 and 20 and beyond, man. So peace and love. It's your boy Dre's, over and out. Seattle Emerald, let's get it.
Happy birthday, Emerald. 8 years, that's not light, man. That's a lot of years, a lot of hard work, a lot of telling our stories. We're super grateful for many more years ahead. To the entire team, thank you for everything that it is that y'all do. This is Ephraim with Boom Boona, and just saying, keep doing what y'all doing, because it is having a tremendous amount of effect. It is telling our story. It's telling the community story, and we are grateful for it. Grateful to you all. I hope y'all celebrate.